Welcome to Season 2 of the Why Me with Vera-Lee podcast series, proudly brought to you by VeraLees Designs. Today's guest is Kyle Spirides, founder of Soul Gazing Photography and Decide Your Destiny Daily Doses of Inspiration. Kyle's vision is to use his deep interest in powerful imagery to spark something emotional within the viewer through creating images to draw you in and pique your interest as you peel back the layers behind that one single moment captured in time. Kyle understands the power of his photography and of his Decide Your Destiny Daily Dose videos, where he brings you tips on how you can get the most out of your day through the choices you make and the ways in which you decide to be in your own space. I will paraphrase as an illustration from one of Kyle's videos about how to own your own space. Deciding to say, no, I'm not going to have people telling me that I can do this, and I'm not going to have people telling me that I can't do that, or I should do this and I shouldn't do that. Say no. This is the space that I am choosing to exist in. I am dedicating my life to. I am inspired to succeed in. I am going to hold on to no matter what. I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to stick here like a 40-ton rock that a hurricane can't even move. This is my space and I'm going to claim it. I love that, Kyle. And I want to say I had chills thinking about you claiming your space and me claiming my space and all of the listeners deciding to claim their own space in this world. For if we do not claim our own space, how are we then to expect others to respect it?
Exactly. How did I know that you were going to choose that one, Vera-Lee?
Did you? That doesn't surprise me.
Yep. I knew. After our chats, I knew.
I love that video. So welcome to the Why Me podcast, Kyle.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be on.
It is. It's great to have you on as a guest, and we've been trying to do this for a couple of weeks now, so it's exciting that it's finally happening.
Yeah, exactly. And I've enjoyed building a relationship with you, in the interim, which is, really a positive out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're one of those people that I'm really thankful that this has brought us together. And of course, you interviewed me on your show a couple of weeks ago as well. Exactly.
And I think, your story was definitely one of the most powerful and impactful stories that, I've ever heard, and really resonates with, I guess, a lot of what I'm trying to do as well. And yeah, I mean, just like taking every breath, enjoying every beat, embracing every heartbeat, it syncs up.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. And I must say that was the first interview that I had done where I was given the space to really talk about some of those moments in depth. And so I do appreciate that.
No, that's awesome. That's good feedback for me. Thank you. And I mean, it's just so easy. I think when you resonate with someone on a deeper level, you naturally create that space and you have that respect, and all the things that kind of interrupt your conversation, whether it's ego or overthinking or trying to be right, all, they disappear when you resonate so well with someone.
They absolutely do. Now, we ask all the big questions here first.
Yes.
Oh, that gorgeous photo of your grandpa's just fallen.
He has gone for a little trip upside down.
Oh.
Let me put him back up there. He does like to come alive every now and then, I will.
Is he on call fluid? Is he?
He yes. So it's. I mean, I can't really nail him in as much as I would like to. But yeah, I guess he doesn't fall often, so I guess maybe he's here with us.
Maybe. That wouldn't surprise me either.
Yes. Apologies about that. Come on,
That's
Gramps.
fine. That's all right. So I'd love to know something that you have on your bucket list and why.
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest things on my bucket list is to inspire millions of people. Mm-hmm. So, whether that is through the videos that I do, whether that's going to be through, the book, Decide Your Destiny, I think inspiring people is really, really important. And, that can come from your relationships, your close relationships that you have with your family, And it can come with people that you just see on the street, and you give them a nice soft smile and you listen to their story, and you can totally change the direction of their life. So inspiring millions, dare I say it, billions, with what I can offer, that would be priority one on my bucket list.
What a fantastic item to have on your bucket list, and a beautiful vision too.
Yes, thank you. It's taken time to develop, and when you're going through your life and you're going through challenges and you're trying to work out who you are and what aligns with you, and then you find it. I think it's really, really, it's really resourceful for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah, it is. It's a magical moment when you feel like you're really stepping into your purpose in life. And when other people then start to come on board, when they become aware of what you're doing, they're like, wow, I love this, I want more. That just feeds your soul as well.
Yeah, and I heard a beautiful quote yesterday, or I was listening to another podcast, and they said something about the universe bends for you, or the universe bends and buckles or bends in your direction. And I totally resonate with that. I think when you're living true to who you are, once you've worked out who you are, and you're not denying what you actually want in your life, whether it's societal, educational, parental, objections over what you want to do, when you're not denying who you are no longer, you embrace it, you just somehow attract all the right people that are on that same wavelength, that their hearts also resonate and beat in that same rhythm. It's amazing.
Yeah, when everything starts to align. And you mentioned a little bit before about sometimes that takes time. It's taking you time to build your people. It's taking you time for people to become aware of what you're doing. And I know I feel the same. It takes time. And I often say to people, everything worth getting takes time. If it comes to you just at the snap of the fingers, then you haven't put all that extra work in, and you haven't really had to buckle down and get that determination going and say, I'm going to stick to this. All these people are saying, no, you shouldn't do that. It's like, no, just say no. Like you said in that video, just say no. Stick to what your vision is. Give it the time, give it the space, give it the effort, give it the determination that you have, give it everything you've got, and allow that time to let everything start to come into alignment, and let the universe bend. It's wonderful.
Exactly. It's the laws of nature. You need time for your crops to grow. You need time for things to develop, and you've got to create the space with that. And I think it reminds me of that saying that my grandmother always used to say. If it was a good thought, it'll come back to you. If it was a good, if you, when you can't remember something, and that happens. You might have an amazing thought, amazing idea, and if you didn't get a chance to write it down, put it in a journal or write it down on your hand. It can come back to you in a week, in a month, and because it was such a powerful idea that resonates with you and aligns with you, I think that's when you start to uncover those parts of your being and the reason you're here.
And I'd also love to know, what book has impacted your life the most?
Brilliant question. I think as you evolve and you go along your journey, there's many inspirations, whether it's people, whether it's people in your life who've recommended books. And books are so powerful, they really can set and change the course of your life. I'm just buying myself time while I can think of what book that is. Look, I want to think of a book that came along earlier, but one that really pops up is David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. And I think, one of the most powerful messages in that book is, what we've been speaking about, is that he owned his space, and he wouldn't be out there doing what he does if it wasn't for him, and he's got this amazing belief, and I believe it as well in my own different way, but it resonates with me, and it's that you're here to, these are my words, but you're here to develop the character of your soul, and so he really believes, when he gets up to heaven, when he passes God, however it is for him, that he's going to have a checklist there, or he's going to have a bit of a visual and say, this is what you were meant to be when you came to Earth. You're meant to be strong. You're meant to be, you're meant to serve. You're meant to be an inspiration for other people. You're meant to do all these great things. And then he sees and sees David Goggins, and David Goggins goes, you know, and sorry, God goes, wow, you've exceeded those things, you know. So I think for him, a big changing point was realizing that he wanted to change those things, and he didn't want to get up to heaven's gates and God say, oh, mate, you know, you were supposed to be all these things. You were supposed to achieve all this. You were supposed to achieve your greatness each and every single day. And that's what I got from that book. You know, it's funny how different people can get different things from different books and different people that you suggest. You know, have a look at this guy, look at some of the content that he shares. But I really got the soul and heart in his book, which is it's a deeper layer than maybe, you know, the swear words or the you know, some of the stories, you know.
I love what you said about the different people will get different things out of the same book. And I think even ourselves at different times in our lives, if we go back and reread a book, we'll get a different layer of understanding, or we'll have a different epiphany while we're reading something, depending on where we are in our life and depending on what experiences we've gone through since the last time we read that book. So yeah, I totally get that. And this is why I love asking this question of all of my guests. And it's also why I'm setting up the website at the moment to have the recommended book list so that people can go through and say, hey, you know, Kyle suggested this book. I've forgotten what it was called. Well, they can go straight to the website and click on it and say, hey, I'd love to buy that book. And of course, a lot of my guests are authors, and you're in the middle of writing your book as well. Yep. And so when that's available, people will be able to go to the same place and just simply click and buy your book as well. I'm really looking forward to reading the book that you're writing. And I know that you're going through the process at the moment. I think a little bit of our conversation last week was how emotional it's been for you going through that process. Do you want to touch on that just a little?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it connects perfectly to your previous question, you know, with the book and how one book can affect you differently to another book, and it can affect you maybe in more of an emotional way. And like you said, when you reread it, or if you look at it at a different time, I mean, one of the best things just on that point that I heard was someone say that they have yearly books. So they have books that they go and read every year. You know, at the start of every year, I read these 6 books or these 4 books. You know, I went, wow, that's a brilliant way to get yourself aligned for the year ahead. You know, so yeah, for me, I've realized because it's a self-help memoir, and my book's self-help memoir is going through a lot of very painful moments in my life that, you know, I didn't necessarily acknowledge were as traumatic as other people acknowledged. And I think when you go through those sorts of things, they're just your, like, you know, people use the term new norm, or they're just your reality, you know. So when you express it with so many other people, and that was part of the inspiration of writing the book, is that when I expressed that to so many other people, they said, wow, that's not right. Or they said, how the hell do you know, how are you normal? Like, that doesn't make sense. What you've been through and who you are now, it just doesn't connect. So I guess, you know, me writing this book was to connect the dots, talk about the heroes who are in my life, and the good things that I got out of those challenges, and also talk about the bad things, you know, because life is filled with everything. And as you're going through that and you're writing it, and now I'm in the self-editing process, it's quite emotional and it's interesting. You'll sit down, you'll have your energy, you'll have your, you know, your boost juice or whatever you need. You'll be ready to go, and yeah, you'll read a page and you'll be like emotionally exhausted, you know, mentally exhausted, mentally conflicted, you know, and I think it's interesting how other things affect you.
They absolutely do. And you mentioned there about some of the heroes along the way in your journey. That leads me to my next question of who has been the most influential person or people in your life?
Person would be my grandmother, and people would be my grandparents. So my story, I guess, really started out when I first met her. I was 2 years old. I came over from South Africa to Sydney, Australia, and I was walking up the stairs to my grandparents' house, my new Australian grandparents, who I wasn't related to. And as my mother and my to-be stepfather brought me over to Australia. And so I was there in his parents' house. I was walking up the stairs and my grandmother looked at me and she saw these lost eyes, you know, like this kind of who are these weird Australian families? Who's this weird Australian family? This isn't my South African family, So she saw this lost eyes and this sort of fear. And she said she had an overwhelming feeling that she was going to be influential and very important in my life. And it was like a message from God that she received. And it was like it shot right through her body. And she still tells that story over and over again to this day. She's 89 years old. And when I was 14 and I had nowhere else to go and I was on the street, who did I go to? I went to her. And they opened up their doors. They opened up their hearts. And they opened up everything of their, 100 and I think at the time 176 years of life experience to me. And I was so lucky, so grateful, and they have shaped me my whole life.
Wow, what a gift.
Yeah, lucky. They were angels.
That's beautiful, and I know we're going to hear a lot more about them when we get into your story. Just before we do, I ask all of my guests to recap a episode from the WhyMe podcast. Which episode did you choose?
So I chose the episode I Am Thorn. And I think I love that episode. I think you guys just, resonated so well together and so relaxed.
Yeah.
And I love that theme. It was just conversational and it was just, really uncovering things, and it's healing for the both of you. As you listen to it, you can hear that it's a healing process for the both of you, which is fantastic. Especially in this time, of the world. And I loved, one of the big parts I loved is how Thorns had a strong relationship with his ex, and he still had a strong relationship with her, and he still spoke of her in such an amazing way, and just how amazing she has been, how she created the space for him, how she allowed him to go after his goals. And as he told the story, it was kind of like it was getting to this pinnacle point where he had to make a decision, he had to make a choice. Am I going to go for it? Am I going to go for it, or am I going to keep, having my goal as just something that I put a little bit of time and effort in every now and then?
Yeah.
His ex gave him the space, gave him the space to go and do that. And he was so grateful to it. And I think why that made such an impact on me is because, you think you're going to go along and you're going to have normal relationships your entire life, but you're not. Relationships are going to get complex. And like you said, when you read a book, at different times, you're going to get different things out of it. Same thing with relationship. As things change in the world, as you change in the world, your relationships are going to change, and, you might have an uncle or, a stepfather or a brother or a friend. And, one part of your life, you might be best of buddies. Another part of your life, you might be mortal enemies, but you you still keep that relationship alive. And I think that was the message I took away.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And that has been an episode that it was the kickoff episode for season 2. And interestingly enough, I tried not to learn too much about Alex before that episode because I like to uncover who people are during the interview, and that way it stays authentic. And yet we did have a very long conversation before we did that recording, probably a couple of weeks prior to that. And I was expecting, I suppose I don't really expect anything, but I didn't get, there must have been some expectation under there because I didn't get with Alex what I expected to some level. And I think it was just the whole pro wrestling, he was a bad boy. And so maybe some part of me, it did expect to feel some different energy. And I think I mentioned during that interview, he was talking about having this energy of this persona of Thorn, the wrestler, and how he just amped himself up. And I was like, yeah, but I don't get that from you at all.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting because that's a classic example of time and differences that we have within ourselves and how connected we are over time. And that now he's in a very different space. And he talked about all the reasons why. And, just that realization that people come in and out of our lives in seasons. And also that in the same way that our relationships with other people develop and change and evolve, so does the relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And I love that journey. I think it's really, really interesting.
It's an exciting journey. Right up there with seeking meaning of life, who you are is just, and who you are as you evolve. As he was talking to you on that podcast, he was, in in a place of transformation and transition. And I think we always are. And that's the beautiful part of being a human, an alive human who's embracing parts of themselves and not laying dormant or have your dreams and goals laying dormant. Because as soon as you unlock those passions and those gifts and, his supplement business and what he wanted to do, it also unlocks so many different areas of yourself. It's so great.
Yeah, it is. And you and I spoke a little bit initially when I first made contact with you. Of course, I resonated with you immediately, being another photographer.
Yes.
And there is something about being a creative person, particularly when you're talking about photography and visual art. I think in my experience, I've certainly found this. I don't know about your experience, but certainly there's an energy and we feed off each other. And the fact that I saw some of your work and the picture that we're looking at of your grandfather behind you, you obviously have talent, you have a lot of skill, and you are able to capture emotion in those moments. And that was also why I paraphrased from that particular episode that you did, because you really do have the ability to do that. And I know a lot of photographers, and not all of them can do that. Portrait photography is it requires a certain level of connection to human to be able to capture that. And I think you do that very well.
Definitely. And I love that you mentioned that word connection, because I think what we're uncovering there is it's the connection to you. And, for photography and portraits, it was a connection to me. And, the same way that I'm writing this book and I'm getting deep into myself and inspiration, and it's uncovering parts of your soul that you wish to share with the world. And I think that's what portrait photography was for me for such a long time, is that I didn't know why. I was like, it was one of those things. And I think for our listeners, for anyone out there, if you just go and McConaughey talks about this in his book Green Lights. If you go walkabout, Aboriginals
yes.
Go walkabout. If you go walkabout, and if you're just letting yourself be free, and you find out what are the things that start pulling you, so obviously some of your habits, you're going to look for your phone because we're all on our phones so much and those sorts of things. But what are some of the other things pulling you? What are the ideas pulling you? What are the inspirations? What are the stories that you've heard? Or, skills that you had when you were younger and now you're thinking about, I'd love to keep doing that. Because as soon as you find those things in whatever way, or a lot of times in life, those things find you,
mm-hmm.
You just have this connection. You can't explain why. And that was with portrait photography. I didn't know why I was taking portraits. I didn't know what I was like transmitting, this energy. And I was walking yesterday. As I'm walking and I'm experiencing life, I'm constantly getting inspirations to put into the book. And that's why the self-editing process has taken so long. But, one of the things connected perfectly with photography, and I think it was, I am expressing a connection. I'm expressing a part of my soul with what I am capturing, and that's what I realized yesterday. I went, that's the realization. That's what it is. I see something. I see a moment. I see light. I see, a subject. I see emotion come together, and it connects with my soul. And the need, it was a serious need. Like, get out of my way. Like, I need to capture this moment, because I need to express this part of my soul that I'm receiving, and share that with the world.
Sharing is caring, and I care. I care about you. I care about your journey into learning who you really are at your core. And I care about my guests and sharing and honouring each of their stories, their unique presence in this world, and embracing who each of us are. You can follow me on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, at VeraLee Original, and on the new WhyMeMovement.com website, where you can book a call with me to discuss where you would like help and support in your journey, and to determine which of my experiences can best suit your needs. I now offer the Embrace one-to-one mentoring to help you gain clarity of purpose, learn the skills to live a more fulfilling life, and to feel more inspired, connected, and empowered to create positive change aligned with your personal aspirations. There's a whole lot more on the website. I would love for you to go and check it out, WhyMeMovement.com. Thank you. That is one of the best explanations of what I feel as a photographer I've ever heard.
Well, I only uncovered it yesterday, so there you go.
I love it. That introspection has
Yep.
provided, that extra level of insight for you, and now you're sharing it with us. Thank you. I was just thinking as you were talking then, I have gone to and come away from and then gone back to portrait photography a number of times. And in the early days, I don't know that I really understood that connection either. And the interesting thing was when I was doing a lot of portrait photography and for whatever reason, I was starting to feel a little bit stale in it. And it wasn't the people that I was photographing, it was me. It was something to do with me at that time in my life. And so many of the photographers I was around were landscape photographers. And my view used to be, seriously, I don't know how you can spend a whole day in one place taking landscape photography. Like, come on, like how does that work for you? What are you getting out of that? And it was interesting how a lot of them didn't really explain what it was that they were getting out of. Maybe they didn't fully understand that either at that point. I don't know. But later on, when I understood the importance of grounding myself in nature, when I understood the importance of the connection to the earth, oh my goodness, landscape photography, here we come. Yep. I would sit there for hours and just observe, and I would just wait until my soul felt like that's the moment. And then it's like, quick, get it,
Yeah.
Amazing. And I love that. And then I think that allowed me that connection to nature and that connection back to myself and that inspiration that allowed me to get back to portrait photography and allowed me to better connect to other humans, I think.
Yeah. And it's like a key. You're uncovering part of you, and you're uncovering a part of you to experience more. Each time you're experiencing more. When you're taking these photographs, you're experiencing more. And it was there already. Reality was there. Everything in abundance in that nature was there already, but you just haven't unlocked yourself yet to experience it in its richness. And when you do, and it's like anything, when you meditate, when you become fully present, when you have a beautiful conversation like we're having now and you're fully present, you experience talking, communication on another level with all its richness.
You do. I think that's a good cue for us to get into your story, Kyle. How about you tell us a little bit about your chosen WhyMe moment?
There were a combination of multiple different points in my life. For a lot of my younger years, in Australia, I lived with my mother, my stepbrother, but, he was as close as anything to me. And in those early years, I would help raise him. I would kind of do those sorts of things like bathe him. When he was teething, I remember seeing how the pain in his eyes. I've never seen so much pain in a kid's eyes. I would grab those toys out of the freezer and help him out. And I had a really close connection to him. And I'd always kiss him on his forehead, every night before I'd go to sleep. And actually, when we got older, he would call it the Jesus kiss. He'd say, "Oh, you're coming in here for the Jesus kiss, are you, Kyle?" I'm like, "Yeah, mate. I've got to do it. I've got to give you a kiss on the forehead." That was my early life in Sydney, Australia. I had multiple WhyMe moments during there, and then later on in my life. But to explain my story, it's a bit complex. I think that's one of the things that I find is that there's multiple locations and multiple people involved. So I will take you right back to the start. I was born in South Africa, Johannesburg. My mother was an international model for Vogue, so she was traveling to places like Japan, Germany, all around Europe. And she would have a contract. She'd have a 3-month contract, but that would get extended for 6 months and extended for another 3 months. So I was pretty much raised by her mother, so my South African granny, and my biological father in South Africa. My granny had a pub. She was running this pub full time. So I actually spent all my time in this pub, which is quite unusual to grow up, I guess, in a pub. I even had my own chair, and I had my TV, and I would. I got told in one of the recollections that I would apparently yell out to my granny because she would spoil me rotten. So I'd like, "Granny, Granny," and I'd say, "Ice cream," ice cream. She'd come over with a Magnum ice cream and help me out. And there was this lovely old lady that would come in on Saturdays, and I was yelling for my granny one day, and this lady came over to me and she said, "Kyle, your granny's working. She's running this pub. She's working. She can't come to you right now." And apparently, I turned to her and I said, "If I call my granny, she will come." And then I yelled, "Granny, Granny." So to understand a bit about my story and who I was I was very, how do I say, bold as a kid. I was very confident and bold. And eventually when my stepfather brought me over here to Sydney, Australia, I continued to be like that, So there was a guy in the street when we were walking, and he looked like WWE wrestler Kane, So he looked like this big, tall guy with long hair, big, strong guy. And we were waiting at the lights, and I'd grab his leg and I'd say, "Excuse me, sir, what's your name?" And to my family's like shock and horror, because they didn't understand why I would communicate so confidently, so boldly. Part of my journey now is to get back to that child. My grandfather, photograph sitting over my shoulder, he always would always tell me, keep that inner child alive. One of the lessons that I realized early on, and I went, that kid was just so confident, as we all are, so confident, so curious, excited about life, interested in things, hopeful, positive, want to get their hands in the clay, want to tear things apart, and that's what I was like a kid. But obviously, as your story goes along, you grow up and you get challenges along your way. The story gets even more complex. But from Sydney, Australia, we grew up in Bondi Beach. My mother and my stepfather and me, we went over to Ireland, and my stepfather with his brother set up a whole bunch of chiropractic businesses and ran them from Ireland. And then eventually my mother came back to Australia. And this is how impressive these parents are, is that my mother and my stepfather split up. But when we came back to Australia, we obviously didn't have anywhere to go. But they took us in, and they said, "No, your family, no matter what, your family, you and Kyle, family, and you can live here." And we stayed with them for 2 years before we moved out on our own.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, that was that journey. And then I grew up with just my mother and my younger brother. She was pregnant as she came back from Ireland to Australia. So, 8 years apart from my brother, and we grew up together in sort of rough circumstances, sort of housing commission, what you could get. My mother was very abusive, both mentally and physically. I guess I didn't realize how much so until I started having relationships in my life, and women from different homes, and also best friends of mine from different homes, and they would tell me that that's not normal, things that would go on. To her respect, she loved me very dearly early on, and she really tried her best. I think she probably had kids too young. I think she was dealing with a lot of issues mentally, and she had a heavy drinking problem that I think became hereditary or was passed down from her father. So that impacted a large majority of my teenage life. I found myself torn apart. One part of me, I loved my brother so dearly, a real strong bond with him, and I obviously loved my mother. And another part of me was going, "No, something's going on. This is not right. A kid should not be getting choked around his neck. Violence, should not be happening at this early age of my life." And the mental abuse. And it's so funny. The violence, the hurt, the scars and scratches, which I've got plenty, they are nothing compared to mental abuse. Mental abuse, I think, is one of the most dangerous things that a human can experience. We do it to ourselves, and we allow other people to do it to us. So I went through that period of my life, and at the age of 14, she kicked me out onto the streets after one argument. She said, "If you don't leave, I'm going to call the cops on you." I believed that would happen, and I believed somehow, she was a master manipulator, and she knew how to get away with a lot of things, and she knew how to convince people, all her friends, that I was the little devil. And I admit there were things that I probably didn't do right. I was growing up and I was wanting to be independent. I didn't want to be controlled. I never laid a hand on my mother. I never did. I never will lay a hand on a woman. There were times when she was coming for my throat, and I had to push her back and just keep my distance, and I would always be closing that door, and with all my body weight, just holding her out. I saw my mother and I loved her, and I saw her eyes pure, and when she was happy, and when she was, she's on the other spectrum. She's got these two extremes. She's very generous, and she can have my stepfather, my biological father, her current boyfriend, all in a room together with different families and have them all get along. She's got that amazing ability. When she's good, she's good. When the darkness takes over, the darkness well and truly takes over. And I would see that in her eyes.
Right.
When I was, on my bed and she was choking me, and I would see that fury and that terror, and it would be like, this isn't her, this is something else, and I would be terrified of that. So anyway, I found myself on the streets late one night. Didn't know what I was going to do. Caught a couple of trains, hopped a couple gates, evaded some transit officers, and got down to my grandparents' house and knocked on their door, and was just trying to get in. I had this urgency to just try and get inside. 'Cause I hadn't spent the night outside on the street, so I just thought I need to get inside. And luckily enough, they opened up their doors and they opened up their hearts. And for me, that was the greatest gift that I've ever had. Those two people are like angels. They've had 150 different people stay at their house. They've had Chinese exchange students, Aboriginals from the country, different family members, cousins, uncles, sisters, people that maybe shouldn't stay at their house, stay at their house. So they were the most amazing people. After that experience, I was obviously damaged and hurt. And I was going through high school at the same time, which is a part of your life where you're really trying to work out who the hell you are.
Oh, yeah. And
you can really, really lose yourself at that time. My cousin back home in South Africa, I got the news one night. My grandmother said, there's some bad news. Something's happened to your granny, my granny in South Africa. And so I went in there with the wrong message and then got my granny on the phone, and something had just happened, and she relayed exactly what happened, recounted it. Probably not the best thing to do to a 15-year-old.
Okay.
But my cousin, and he was like an older brother when I was in South Africa, when I'd go back, he was someone that I would play with, someone that I would always look up to. And yeah, he had been murdered. And so I got all the details, all the gory details.
Oh, wow.
Right at that point. And then 8 months later, my Opa, my grandfather in South Africa, passed away. So that 14, 15, 16-year-old time was really dicey, really what way I was going to go, hanging around the wrong crowds, not dealing with my emotions, getting into a lot of fights, both inside and outside of school, and extremely sensitive, different words, like the word gun would upset me. I couldn't handle the number 3 for a long time because, when my grandmother recounted that story, my cousin had been murdered and his girlfriend got back home. 3 people came into the house. He got up, knocked the one person out, knocked the other person out, and it was a third person who shot 3 bullets, and it was the third bullet that killed him. But he was a real hero because he created that time for his girlfriend to run out of the room so that nothing else would happen.
Oh.
The lights switched on. He saw these 3 people standing over his bed, and he just acted. I think created a lot of physical issues that didn't show themselves just yet. About 2 months after I finished school, they did. And where I was living was, you go into the front door and you turn left, and there's my grandfather's study where he his drawing board, because he was an architect. And at the back of that, that's where they had a bed there for me, and I'd call it a dungeon, because it was kind of under the house and in a way one corner. So I'd always try and evade into the dungeon without her noticing, but she'd get up and she would just, douse me in love. She would just, how's your day? How you go? Everything. And she would try. And I'd be polite, but I was also rude in the sense that I was just shutting her out. And I was shutting everything out because all I knew was hurt and pain during that time. And I felt if I open myself up, I'll get pain. And also I, opened myself up to my mother, and I told her stories and things about me and expressed things. And I found out that she, all her friends knew. And once I found out that I couldn't trust the one person in this life that you're supposed to trust the most, I went, you can't trust anyone. And I closed up shop.
Right. I love reading your comments and appreciate your support in sharing this podcast with those you feel will also enjoy the content created for you. One of the easiest ways to do this is simply to leave a rating and review. If you would like my support in helping you to find your why, search the hashtag WhyMe Movement, because what follows that question, why me, is the movement. It's up to you to take action, and I am here when you are ready to help you see a different perspective and to choose your own hope and happiness in life.
And so I went through that period of my life, and I think that had a big physical impact on my health. Went through school. I mean, rugby was my godsend. I was very into rugby. I was playing rugby Saturdays and Sundays. I was into the gym. So I found ways to alleviate some of the pain, and find a sense of belonging, find a place to belong. I belonged on that rugby pitch. I belonged to that team, the coaches, Whenever I did good, they would give me in a better sense of the word, love, in a way. They would provide me with love because, well done for that tackle, well done for that play. And I really had this strong affinity and relationship with rugby, so much so that I thought I was going to go back to South Africa and play for the Springboks. Because I always had a strong affinity with South Africa as well. I kind of viewed, it's interesting how you experience certain things in your life and you view different places in different ways.
Yeah.
Australia is a much, much safer country overall, with less pain, a country with less pain body than South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
South Africa is a highly dangerous country, beautiful country. Mm-hmm. But I always felt that I couldn't stand Australia, and I think it was the pain that I experienced. Yeah. But South Africa was my haven, because when I would go back there, my family would open up their arms. I would just get doused in love. They were very kind of, they had that woggy sort of way of engaging with you. They'd hug you, they'd hold you. Memories of my yaya, who lived in South Africa as well, would squeeze my cheeks tight, so tight, feel it rip off, and I hadn't yet opened myself up to my Australian grandparents' love. I did the things that I could do in my teenage years, and then eventually I graduated. I focused on my studies and just focused on myself and creating success and putting trust in myself. So it was really a relationship about myself that I was developing. And about 2 months after I finished school, I graduated. I was coming back late one night from the gym. So I was still in the gym. The beach guns. Got to get everything going, and so I was feeling good coming home from the gym one night. Went to the convenience store, got a pop up, and I came home, and I felt really hot. I took all my clothes off, and then I felt really cold and put all my clothes on. So I had these extreme temperature changes in the space of like 5 minutes. Yeah, and then the next night I got up, went to get some ice out of the fridge, and I collapsed onto the ground, and I laid there. I think it was probably about 20 minutes, but I was conscious, but I just couldn't move.
Mm.
And then the week proceeded. I was actually this is one of the times that I was staying with my mother, her current boyfriend, my granny from South Africa, because she was over, my brother and different families. So I had come from, living at diners, and I was staying with them for a couple of days, always trying to reconnect. There were times where, even though I was kicked out and I didn't live with her, I would always go back and try and reconnect and try and, when other family was around, and foster that relationship. And I just got more and more sick every day. And then eventually, I started saying, I need to go to the hospital. I need to go to the hospital. Something is seriously wrong with me. I need to go to the hospital. Not with this much energy that I'm speaking with now. I had no energy. I was coming out both sides on the toilet. My mother took me to a doctor, and she said, you've got gastro, just take some pills. You'll be fine. Went home, took pills. Another day, nothing happened, and it seemed to be getting worse. So my mother actually took me down to my grandparents, and my grandmother saw me. This level of sickness, everything gets dark, and your peripheral vision kind of gets real narrow. So I don't know if you've experienced that, or if anyone's experienced that level of sickness. So I didn't really know what was going on, but my grandmother kind of took me to the local doctor. And the local doctor was this lovely guy. When I was going through problems with my mother in teenage years, he gave me this book called Hope, and it just had quotes and beautiful landscapes all through the book. So I was like, what doctor does this? Guy was incredible. So I went to this doctor. It was this Chinese doctor. He'd been in the hospital studying 10 years earlier. He was very astute, and he looked at my fingers and he said, you've got an infection on your heart. I went, what? He said, see these red dots on the tips of your fingers? It means you've got an infection on your heart. You need to go to the hospital right now.
Wow.
I reacted like, oh, okay, because I was just so sick at that time.
Mm.
Rushed to the hospital. My grandmother said, I need to excrete, but I can't, And then so I grabbed the nurses again, and the nurses looked at my papers and said, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be going through ICU. You can't excrete because your organs are failing. They're shutting down.
Wow.
And so probably the blessing is that I was so sick that I wasn't scared, So I went through, cardiologist was over my bed, over me, and said, Kyle, we're just going to put a pipe down your throat, and you're going to go to sleep. And I just went, okay. Totally out of it. They put me to sleep. They told my mother and my grandmother that it's very unlikely that I will survive the night. They want to operate. And basically what it was is there was a 3-centimeter bug eating away at my heart valve. So,
a bug?
Yeah, a bug. And it was eating away at my heart valve. Now, this is where the story takes a turn. It's quite interesting. My mother called my stepfather, the stepfather who brought me to Australia, the stepfather who I went to Ireland with, said, this is the situation. What do we do? I didn't know at that time, but my stepfather, he was a chiropractor as well, but she always went to him for, I guess, natural health care and opinions and different sort of things like that, because he had healed certain things in the past. So he had a holistic idea on healing. He made a call over the phone, which the listeners at home will probably be shocked by this, but he said, don't let them operate. He's too weak. And he does kinesiology, so I don't know if he was talking to the ether, if he was taking in all the circumstances and making a call or what it was, but he made that call.
Or bending the universe.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, he made that call. He does this thing where he pulls his fingers sometimes when I'm asking him a health question, and I think because he's a kinesiologist, I believe that he's asking the ether or something, tapping into some sort of information that we can't physically see. So I went into induced coma, woke up a couple of days later, had some Weet-Bix, vomited the Weet-Bix right onto my hospital gown. I was a mess. And my stepfather was there, and he said, Kyle, this is the situation. He showed me all the paperwork, showed me everything, and said, we can do two things. We can go down the medical route. They're going to cut this part of your heart off. You're going to have metal attachment. You're going to be on heavy drugs the rest of your life. Your life's going to be impacted, and you're not going to be able to do a lot of things. And I was 18, and wow. So then he said, or you can try this diet, and it's called the alkaline diet, and it's basically what it is juice fasting. He said the premise of it is that you get rid of all sugars in the body, and you starve the bug out. So you literally drive the bug out of your body because it can't feed on anything, any sugars, carbohydrates, any energy to keep it alive. Mm-hmm. Big decision, big call to make. And
a lot of trust in that decision, whichever way you ended up going, which we'll find out in a second. But wow, there's a lot of trust.
It's not a normal decision that you'd be making. You'd think you'd be making. Your decision you'd be making was what I was doing a few weeks later, was looking at colleges to go and study at that time of your life. Mm. But yeah, so I looked in the eyes of my stepfather, and I said, look, you've always looked after me. You've always done really good by me. You've always looked after me. I trust you as a man. I'm not sure about this. I've never been exposed to this. I'm a rugby footy boy, meathead sort of mentality, muscles and and that sort of jazz. I trust you as a man. If you say this will work, let's give it a go. Mm. And then that started the journey of radical discipline and healing my body. First, I was writing down, I thought, a menu of the things that I would love to have. I thought, his name is Ward. I thought Ward was, my stepfather was taking a menu order, because he said, write down all the foods that you really like. I said, triple cheeseburger, I love ice cream, I love this. And I go, sweet Ward, when are we getting this? And he said, no, mate, you're going to sweat that out of your system. You're going to sweat it out of your mind, you're going to sweat it out of your system, because what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to juice beetroot juice, spinach. You have to have salads. You're going to have vitamins. You're going to be listening to meditation tapes. You're going to be visualizing and putting fingers over your heart where the valves are, and you're going to be saying heal every morning and every night. You can't have electronic devices near you. You're just going to be focused on healing. And that was grueling. I had my first sip of beetroot juice, and I just instantly regretted my decision. There's no way I can bear this. This is revolting. So yeah, it's not that you're superhuman. It's not that, juice tastes different to you. It's just out of necessity. Yeah. I needed to heal myself naturally because I wanted to have a brilliant life. And I had a lot of plans. I had a lot of visions for my life, and it just wasn't going the way it was going. So I had to intervene. So yeah, we started on this juice diet. It obviously wasn't well received.
Well received by the doctors, by the rest of your family?
Yeah, but by a majority of the family, the staff in the hospital. Some of the nurses were trying to throw out my vitamins. They were telling me what did I think I was doing. Luckily, I had a strong group of friends at that time, and I literally filled out the room, at the start nearly every day with this abundance of love with friends and family. I had my 19th birthday in the hospital. I had cards surrounding me, and I was put in this room where everyone going into that room was constantly shifted out to operation. So I would see so many people come in, and you'd see people with blood on their top, and it was, and you were woken up every 4 hours, and it was a very brutal experience. So having that love And that support was amazing. But yeah, I had people, family, and lots of people that did not believe what I was doing, and not in the sense of, I think you're making a bad career choice or a bad life choice, like an actual, this is your effing life, and I don't agree with what you're doing, and you need to make, I don't want to come anymore. Or, like, they didn't say that because obviously it was a sensitive situation, but they didn't show up anymore. Yeah, so it was a few close people, you're tight-knit, you're a tribe. And I did the juicing, I healed, I did all the healing exercises, I had all the vitamins, I focused on it, and I visualized my heart healing. And the first meeting with the cardiologist, he said, all right, are you ready to operate? So this is the first or second week. And I said, well, hang on a minute. What's the other options? We went through everything. We sat down with him for a long time. We said, can you please tell us, what does the bug have to get to until it's a non-issue? What size does it have to get to until, there's no need to operate? And he wouldn't give us the answer. So we pressed. Ward knew what to say, the right questions. Eventually he gave it out. He said, look, if it gets to 0.5 centimeters, then it's a non-issue. But every moment right now, you could have a stroke, you can die. It's very strange, and I totally respect and understand from the doctors, from the nurses, from my family, their understanding and their wanting, their intentions of wanting to help me out, and of course they wanted to help me out. So, but we were challenging that. We were going against the grain.
Yeah.
Which as soon as you go against the grain, as soon as you challenge other people's belief systems through your own actions now, you're going to get a lot of disturbance and literally a lot of hate while you're in that vulnerable situation. It doesn't matter if you're in a vulnerable situation or you're going through a hard time. You challenge my belief system, I'm not going to like you.
Yeah, a lot of pushback and resistance to that.
Yeah, so I experienced that for the first time. And, you grow up pretty naive as a kid. Every policeman's good, every doctor's good, every fireman's good. Everyone's, who's in these services are good and well-intended, and they want the best for you. And I'm not saying they didn't, but, you get a new raw experience of life. So anyway, we keep doing the juicing. One special moment in the hospital, my mother was, at the foot of my bed with my stepfather, and my mother was crying, and my stepfather said, look, Kyle doesn't need that right now. He needs all the support. He needs all the, the support he can get. And I turned to him, I went, wow, look at us, one big happy family all together,
Wow.
Once again. So I would always try and find jokes and find humor in those times. And we all kind of chuckled, it was kind of like a beautiful moment. And now it's a beautiful token, a beautiful memory in my mind and in my heart. So the cardiologist came back in and he said, all right, we're going to operate. We said, no, it's been 3 weeks now, 3.5 weeks. What's the details? And he said, I think you should operate. You guys have put it too long. You haven't listened to me right. And we said, no, just give us the numbers. And he said, look, the bug is at 0.2 centimeters. And me and my stepfather, clapped each other, cheered. He went, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
The cardiologist stormed out the room actually swearing. So I guess we understood what he felt.
Okay.
And yeah, so that was my experience there. And then, as I was leaving the hospital a couple of weeks later, because they wanted me to stay in there for a total of 6 weeks, the register, who was the Somalian gentleman that I had made great friends with, and we were great buddies, I was being pushed out in a wheelchair, and he grabbed my shoulder, and I turned to him and looked, and I said, oh, hey, I'm going now. And he said, oh, no, I just have to tell you one thing from the cardiologist. I said, okay. He said, he wants me to inform you that, your lungs will be filled with blood. You'll choke to death on your sleep within at least 2 months because of the decision you're making. Your heart is leaking. So basically what had happened is the bug had eaten part of my heart valve. And so my heart valve, your heart valve's supposed to close and open, close and open. And it wasn't quite closing properly. So it was leaking blood.
Wow.
So I went to a new cardiologist, explained my experience with him. My old cardiologist, he said, I play golf with that guy. I don't want to hear anything bad about him. And my family started to roll up, and I said, no, everyone out the room. I need one good relationship with one cardiologist right now.
Yeah.
I just need to get on board and focus on what I'm going to do. When I went to him, he said, there's a 30% chance of repairing your valve. And I kept going on my health plan. And over a year, I was talking to people in Germany, looking at stem cell research with the heart. They said a heart valve is too hard at this stage, and I was constantly trying to search. I was seeking. I went away to Albury Wodonga, and I studied environmental science for a little period of time during that, just to get away.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to my cardiologist every 3 months. And every time I went back, there was a high percentage of me having a repaired valve if we did surgery. Eventually, it was a year after my surgery. A year after I got sick. And he said, all right, it's a 70% chance now. Your heart's actually no longer swollen. It's gone down in size. And I said, I called Ward, my stepfather. I said, what do we do? And he said, what do you feel like doing? I said, look, I think it's probably time that I have the operation. And this wasn't an easy operation. This was open heart surgery. And leading up to the open heart surgery, my granny from South Africa came over. My mother was obviously dealing with it in a hard way, a lot of alcohol. She thought I was on heavy drugs at the time. She was convinced. She was trying to tell me, I got to get off the drugs. And she was totally out of it, just emotionally overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And she was heavy, so I told my grandparents, this is the date I'm going for the surgery. Mm-hmm. No one is to know. You're to take me. I'm not seeing, anybody outside of you guys. And besides that, I actually saw a friend the night before, and I went over to his house and I was playing video games, and I left, and as I left, he said, oh, don't you have that thing tomorrow? And I was just like, yeah, I've got that thing. Yeah, I'll see you next week. And, so I was keeping everything calm and normal, and I just knew that I had to get my mind in the game and I had to be on point. I was still young and I was still a little bit reckless. So when I went in for the surgery, and my grandparents took me in, the anaesthetist saw my body and he said, what are all these bruises all over your body? And I smirked at him. I said, I went and played paintball the other week. And he just shook his head like, what are you like? What are you doing? But I felt like, there's certain things that I was doing. I was really disciplined with my life, and there were certain things I was doing just to kind of keep my mind going and keep me positive, keep me living, because I was going in to have open heart surgery. Had the surgery, which, 5-hour surgery, they crack your chest open, they take your heart out, you're pretty much dead for about 5 hours while they operate your heart. They're cutting to your heart. I woke up, and apparently when I woke up, I was screaming, repair or replacement, repair or replacement.
Oh, were you?
Repair or replacement. And so it was just crazy. And someone came over, grabbed my hand and said, Carl, they repaired your valve.
Yeah.
I think I was swearing, but I was like, yes. So I was
still got your heart.
yeah, I still got my heart, and I was like so happy. And how they do it, they use a bit of your own heart valve, they use a bit of cow valve, they use angioplasty like ring, they use a few different things. And but I had a full suit. I had 3 scars and 3 pipes into the bottom, just under my ribs. I had a massive zipper scar down the front, and I was in just a lot of pain. And one of the doctors came over and said, look, Carl, you're in heart block. We're going to have to put you on this machine, and it's keeping your heart going, but we'll reconvene at the end of the week and see if your heart gets into rhythm. Usually your heart will get back into rhythm. End of the week came around, and they said, look, you haven't come out of heart block. We're going to have to do another operation. And I just thought, shit. I thought I asked every question that could happen, but this was something that I didn't know. So I went in, had an operation, put a little battery in, and now that helps me beat.
So this is like a pacemaker?
Yeah, pacemaker, a couple of wires into the heart. And then about 6 weeks later, I had another situation. I was getting quite bloated, and I was about to go for my provisional license. And I was with someone. They said, no, look, I think I'll take you to the doctor, because this is serious. You just had heart surgery. Went to the cardiologist. He said, what the hell are you doing? Your pericardium, your heart wall has filled up with blood. You've probably had hours to live. And I went, what the hell? How am I keep finding myself in this situation? I said, I went to the hospital, where I was living in Cronulla a week ago, and they said I was fine. What happened is they did an ECG, not an echocardiogram. Echocardiogram is when they actually do like an ultrasound of your heart.
Right.
And so he was furious. I'm going to write them a letter. I'm going to sue them. This is ridiculous. With someone who has surgery, you've got to do an echocardiogram. They rushed me off to the hospital again. And then this time I was awake for the surgery. And
you're awake during heart surgery.
Yeah. So this one was a big needle. My heart wall, your heart sits in your pericardium, and my heart wall had filled up with 2 liters of blood. Mm-hmm. So they have to puncture the heart wall. So they have to put a needle this big in. So the doctor said, are you right, Kyle? And I was turned away, and I looked over at him, and I saw the needle, and I just thought, why did you tell me to ask me if I was all right? Because I just saw this gigantic needle. It went in my chest. Didn't really feel a lot because I think it was, local anesthesia. And he pulled out 2 liters of blood, and he showed me these 2 big bags of blood. And so that didn't conclude it, because, once you have heart surgery, you live your life with heart management, and there's procedures, there's medication, there's every time you go back to them, there's new ideas, new ways we can, so it's really, you're managing your heart the rest of your life. I ended up getting to AF, atrial fibrillation, and then you've got to manage that. And then, they wanted to put a third wire in because, the wire wasn't really working with me in atrial fibrillation. And then they want to do another procedure. So, I guess it definitely changes you.
Oh, yeah.
Changes you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It changes you on so many levels. As humans, we are complex beings, and we often complexify things even more. And you mentioned earlier today, keep it simple, stupid. That's what I need to be doing. And it's interesting how often in our lives that can help us with the overwhelm. It can help us with all of these things going on. And almost in a way, when you were out of it, that very first point when you got there, you didn't yet know about this bug. You knew that they were going to sort of go into and do this surgery. And essentially, this was almost taken out of your hands, that you were keeping life simple at that point because you were just surviving. You were just trying to hang on however you could. So everybody else around was complexifying the situation. And yet you were able to keep it simple for your own self, whether that was conscious or not. It's interesting. Now, I've written a number of things down here, and we're going to go through them little bit by little bit.
Yes. Let's do it.
The first one, the number 3.
Yes.
You mentioned the significance of the number 3 in a number of events that have occurred. You also mentioned about the wires, and my question to you is going to be how many wires were put into your heart through this pacemaker? And then you mentioned later about they wanted to put in a third wire. Did they put in the third wire?
Correct. They put it in February of last year. There you go.
Very, very interesting. So the number 3 is very significant in your life.
Yeah.
Do you remember a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago that I'm looking for a certain journal?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So just so that the listeners know what I'm talking about, I was talking to you, Kyle, a couple of weeks ago about one of the many times that I was in ICU in hospital and waking up at 3:33 a.m. And I happened to have a journal with me at that time. And I was very perplexed as to what this 333 meant. It was not 3:32 and then a clock would tick over to 3:33, or, it wasn't 3 o'clock and then I'd look at the watch at 3:33. I was waking up at 3:33 and it was almost every night for, weeks on end. And I started researching into what the significance of 333 was. I still, unfortunately, have not found that journal where I've recorded all of those notes. But what I did do was, when I was in the hospital, I was researching, and you can just Google 333 biblical significance, for example. I'll do this very quickly now. What does the meaning of 333 mean in the Bible? And one of the first things that's come up is that it's an angel number. The most important meaning of number 333 has something to do with your own strength and power. And if we have a look at a couple of others, and I know that in that journal, I wrote down a whole heap of things that I got off Google, but I also had my Bible with me at the time. And I went through and I'd highlighted passages that were relevant, and I'd highlighted, pages that had 3s on them. And I was making all these connections all over the place. And it blew my mind, the significance of these numbers. I'm coming soon and my reward is with me. Brace yourselves and don't look back, for the storm will not pass until I stop the storm. Now, I've just grabbed a random link off Google and seen that in bold. And how does that relate to so much of what you've shared with us here tonight?
How powerful is that? It's
so powerful. And this links directly into the very first note that I wrote. And this relates to what you've called your business, Soul Gazing Photography. Yep. This relates to a lot of the words that you use when you spoke about connection. You spoke about your stepfather, and the listeners won't have seen this, but I saw the way that you are connecting almost like links of a chain when you're talking about your stepfather and being the kinesiologist and how he would do that. So it was the thumb and forefinger linked together in two circles in like a connection of a chain.
Yeah.
And to me, connection has been so vital for you in your life, not only because of the disconnection that you felt with your mum, but also the significant, strong connection you still felt with her. So it was only those times when her eyes changed, when you saw that shift in her behavior and you saw that shift in her intention. And so talking about those things, it really is very apparent to me how important soul gazing is to you, and how this is not just the name of what you do. This is not just the way that you connect with people. This is not just the way that you connect with yourself. This is everything about you, in that you understand how the eyes are the window to our soul, how you understand that those moments, although sometimes they are fleeting, can be so significant to us and to our soul.
Yeah.
Wow.
Once you tap into the soul and once you live your soul forward and live your heart and your soul forward, life is forever changed. And, you know, I'm chasing things, I'm striving for things, I've got goals, I've got visions and dreams. And the beauty is that doesn't end. I'm not sitting on the top of a mountain and saying, I have arrived, you know.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I've uncovered things about myself. Most life uncovered for me. Tragedy, challenges, heartache, pain uncovered it for me. And a lot was uncovered through connection. You know, talking to my grandparents, talking about them, they were living their soul forward. You know, like I say, I when I talk about them, I look from also a separated, just observant sort of view. And that's what my grandfather was. He was like a very observant person. He'd observe people in the party. He'd sit back. He would observe himself his whole life. They were very observant people, you know. And the amazing thing is they would always have people come into the house and sit down and talk with them. You know, they make a cup of tea and they have the neighbor. And my grandmother was a counsellor for 60 years. It was kind of like they were counselling for everybody. You know, everybody, you know, you'd have a gynecologist they knew 60 years earlier, and all these different sort of people would come into their life and come and see them and come and connect with them. They were living their soul forward. And in doing that, they were creating space to allow people to connect. And that person, maybe they don't connect a lot for the rest of their week, but when they come and they see my grandparents, they connect and they actually expose their soul because they've been welcomed into a safe space, you know. And that's what my grandparents gave me. They gave me a safe space. And when you talk about the soul and the essence, you know, I would go in there every morning and chat with them for hours, and I go in their bedroom every morning, every night, and chat to them. You know, and a lot of the things that I was contending with were pretty hard things. You know, was when I was going back and forth with my mother and deciding, do I cut this person out of my life completely? You know, I feel like I've got an anchor wrapped around my leg, and every time I wanted to rise for success, for a better life, for striving, I feel like emotionally I'm absolutely traumatized and pulled down, you know, through guilt and blame and manipulation and victimhood, and it's all you. And it would get to the point where I knew the horrors that she did to me. But I would always think, because I was very self-critical and observant, I'd go, you know, did I do anything to cause that? Was I the best that I could have been in that situation? Maybe did I react too fast? Did I not allow her enough time? You know, and I would leave the door, literally leave the door after she shut it in my face, because, you know, I was kicked out multiple times. And I would straight away, my mind would go straight away, what could I have done better? You know? And a lot of people have said, you know, to me, Kyle, you know, don't take on that, you know, emotional baggage, don't take on that load, don't think, you know, like, you did everything right. A kid's not supposed to know all these things, you know. And I respect what they're saying. I respect the place that they're coming from in love, but I think that has served me so well in my life to always analyze myself. And it's not a detrimental analyzing like, oh, I caused that. Or if I wasn't such a this, then we wouldn't have had a fight. It's a, did I do everything I could? Could I have been better? And that allowed me to actually understand her even more and understand the right and wrong and make the decision. Because if I go there and I give my all and I am the best I can be, and I try and leave my ego at the door, I try and, you know, be as present as I can, and she still acts like that, then I know it's not on me. I've done everything I can, and I can understand that person at a deeper level.
It's that different perspective. And again, it's throwing light on all areas that you need to. If we talk about visual here for 1 second, you know the importance of light in photography, you know the importance of illuminating the areas of your subject matter, whether that be people or a landscape, whatever it is. You need the lighting to be right, to be conveying that moment in the way that you want to. And so it's that perspective. And in photography, perspective is everything. You change a slight angle of the camera and all of a sudden your portrait is not going to be represented the way that you see it because of the way that the lens distorts. So it's quite obvious to me, again, listening to you talk, how important perspective has been throughout all of those experiences, and that rather than holding anger and blame, you're trying to look for ways to, again, you mentioned the word being a seeker earlier, and I love that word. I often refer to myself the same way. When you are a seeker, you're always looking for that other perspective. You're always looking for the hope that you can hang on to, even in the adversity. You're looking for the ways that you can analyze something to possibly, if there's an opportunity to do it better next time or to get something out of it. Sometimes it's not even about doing better, or us at all. It's about, well, this stuff has happened. What good can come out of it? So it's seeking that side of it.
That's one of the most exciting things about life, and something my grandmother, my Australian grandmother, taught me. She'd say, "Look at the donut, not the hole. Look at the glass, half full." And everyone's heard the saying, but with everything that's important, and with my book, whenever I break something down, I usually use the words, "Let's go deeper. Let's go deeper." Because with everything, when we go deeper, then we can actually maybe decide whether we want to adopt it in our day-to-day life. And anything worth doing is worth doing every day. So understanding that self-analysis comes from a place of curiosity, comes from that place of that inner child, comes from that place of, oh, I want to work out more in life. And, those times, and maybe why, I've been told, yes, you're very patient, or, someone recently told me, you seem to just react better or bounce back, or, I got abused about something recently, and it wasn't my fault. It was in public, and I kind of just laughed it off, and I told the person about it, and they were like, "Wow, if that was me, I would have got really emotional. I would have got upset. I would have yelled back. I would have, that would have, been with me for the week, Right. And so for me, I think I've always been so curious, and it's keeping that curiosity alive. And I've been very lucky and fortunate to have grandparents as I've had, to allow that space for me to create my own destiny. To decide my own destiny, to toy with my own destiny, and speak about it every morning, every night. I was able to do that, and learn from their wisdom and all that. But I think what it really is that now you're not entering life and going bad, good, or hurt, satisfaction. Dopamine hit, sadness. You're entering life and you're going, wow, what can I learn from it? That was pretty rough. That one was pretty rough. That was pretty intense, and I think I did everything I could, but there was that part where I did swear, and you really shouldn't swear at your parents. So maybe next time we won't do that. And I think that's the interest, the curiosity, the vigor of life, is that now you're going to go ahead with everything, and you're going to be curious and investigative, and you're going to enjoy life. Because you're not abused by life. You're not saying life is something that's happening to me, pain and all this, I've got to deal with this, it's a weight on my shoulders. You're saying, no, I'm picking up the weight of life. I'm picking up the things that I've got to deal with. I'm picking up heart maintenance and making sure I'm healthy the rest of my life. And I'm going to carry it, and I'm going to see where it leads me. It's going to lead me to meet exciting people. It's going to lead me to new technologies in the future. It's going to lead me to a different level of energy, a different respect for myself and my body. And like you said before, it's that perspective shift.
It is so powerful. I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier about getting back to your inner child and getting back to your childhood, and that moment when your grandmum met you, when you were walking up those stairs and you were about 2, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yeah, correct.
And she just felt this connection. As you grew, and you spoke about a moment in time where, you were essentially shutting her out. And I did write down the words that, you were shutting everybody out because you didn't want to be opening up to the pain.
Mm.
I'm wondering how you repaired that side of yourself with your relationship with your grandparents, because obviously their connection to you is very, very strong. In addition to everything that or those relationships gave you as a child, it gave them as an adult. It gave them the ability to be looking through your childlike perspective. And you got the ability to be receiving so much wisdom from them as well. So I'm wondering at what point that relationship shifted again and that you did go back to opening up to them, because that would have been a very significant time and space in that relationship with them.
Yeah, I mean, some of my family commented that I was in the tunnel. That was kind of the expression. Like, he's in the tunnel, he's in a dark place, he's emotional, he's a teenager, he's got hormones, he's got, which I don't think is healthy for any parent or anybody to downplay emotionally what someone's going through in their teenage years. You can understand, yes, there's hormones, there's different sort of things going on. But like I say with everything, and like you mentioned and you brought up, what's the soul? Let's go deeper. Let's investigate. Let's be curious. Why do they react like that when I ask them to open up? Why, when I bring back that memory, why do they get squirmish and walk away from me? Life has signs, life has signals, and it shows you. And that's my grandparents. They were a better sign for my life. They were a signal for a better way of living, and they were a signal for love. And it was unconditional love that they gave me. And I think I hadn't felt that in a long time. I felt a lot of conditional love.
Yeah. One
thing that I didn't mention about my youth was, there were times where my mother and my stepfather would be fighting. And my stepfather, I remember waking up one night in Ireland, walking out of the room, and I was maybe 6 years old, and I looked and the door was open. And it was dark. It was kind of eerie. One lamppost in the street, light, rushing through the hallway of our house. And then I looked over the stairs, and my stepfather was over my stepmother and holding her down. And I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But what I saw was blood on the side of his head and blood on a brick. And my mother turned to me and said, "Call the police. Call the police." And this wasn't the first time. There were other times in Sydney, Australia, other times, and my mum had a weapon to my father, and she looked at me and said, "Call the police." And I would literally look back, and my stepfather said, "I don't know how you did it," or it would just confound me. But I would say, "But Mum, you're the one holding the knife."
Right.
"But Mum, you're the one, inches away from his neck. You're the one attacking him." Literally, I'd say, "You're the one attacking him." So in this situation with the brick, I always remember it. Like and you talk about visual, I can see it as I'm talking. I can see it as pure as a picture. And she turned to me, and her eyes, so she's laying on the stairs, and she looks at me, and her eyes look at me with this fear, and she just looks at me and she said, "Call the police." And I'm in two minds, because I've just worked out what's happened. But, this situation looks like, I don't know who's in the right here, trying to work out right and wrong. And she said, "If you love me, you will call the police." So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the mental abuse.
Yes.
It's a little bit hidden. I've had to go back into my life and really uncover those things and see, okay, that's not right. That's why I'm very individual in certain situations, and why I will cut people off quickly, or I will, not now, but when I was younger, and I'll be in Ireland, So, that's the conditional love that I had.
Yeah.
With my grandparents, I had unconditional love. And I can't remember an exact point of a turning point, but I just think it was her relentless saturation of complete love and attention, and she never, ever gave up. And for anyone listening at home, never give up. Keep knocking at the door. Keep bashing down the door.
Yeah.
Keep being there. You know, and it's not just that she was knocking at the door and she was shouting at me and loving me one day. No, it's how she was doing it.
Yeah.
She was asking me questions, just asking me questions, and she was waiting for me to open like a flower. You know, she was waiting for me to open. You know, she was watering me and waiting for me to open, and you know, eventually I did. And it was the greatest thing that I ever did was open up my heart, my soul to my grandparents, because there was a lot of prepare work that needed to be done.
Wow. So what she's done is she's helped you to peel off the layers.
Yeah. Yeah. Even today, I will say, when you talk about that connection, I call her every now and then, you know, every few days, and she misses me a lot because I'm on Perth, Western Australia, so on the west side, and she's in Sydney, and
there's 3 hours difference.
Yeah, 3 hours difference. Exactly, good point. It's getting late, and she would, bless her soul, she always cries when I hang up, like when we hang up, and even when I try and divert, or I'll say like, oh, you know, I'm going to speak to my brother and I'll try and get onto him. My brother's currently in London. I'm going to try and get onto him, and I'll let you know a bit about what's going on in his life. And she, you know, she'll always tear up right at the end. And even if I try and distract her or divert her attention, I'll go, but I'll call you. I'm going to call you tomorrow. I'll call you. But then she goes, I love you, and she'll say something like, you know, same to you, darling, and then she'll tear up. So this connection, this bond, and the funny thing is, we're born on the same day.
Really?
So yeah, 5th of February. So, you know, this connection, this bond that I have with her, for me, it's an unusual one. Like it doesn't feel like she is not related, and it doesn't feel like she's my grandmother. To me, she is my mother. And she's, you know, I believe in past lives. I definitely think we were, you know, we had either a mother or who knows in a past life. And my grandfather, he passed away a few years ago, and I went over there to help care for him as he passed. And you know, he you know, there were some hard times when you're caring for someone right to the end. And also beautiful times. I was holding his hand with my grandmother on the other side, and Ward on the other side, as he took his last breath on this earth. You know, and towards the end, you know, he was talking about, he had these visions, and I didn't realize they would go to church, but I didn't realize how religious they were. They had faith, they had a strong faith in God, but they didn't press anything on me in my life. And naturally, I developed a belief in God on my own. Like a lot of things, they allow me space to create my destiny on my own.
Yeah.
We asked him, you know, what are you seeing? Because he would come out in and out of consciousness, and he was set up in a hospital bed in his living room to look over the river in the building that he designed 70 years earlier. So, you know, what are you seeing as you feel like you're passing over? What's going on? And he said, Jesus is there by the river. He's got a boat there for me, and he's by the river. And and he just had this smile, and he just, you know, say he's got so much love. He's got so much love. You know, so that they, you know, and even my grandmother said, I didn't realize he had such a strong faith. I didn't realize how strong the faith was. And right towards the end, you know, he would say, you know, that's your mother, Kyle. That's your mother. Make sure you look after her. And, you know, and he'd say, you're my son, and I love you. And he was a stoic man and an Aussie bloke, you know, but he wasn't someone with a lot of emotional. It didn't seem like he had a lot of emotional bandwidth in terms of his words, but he did have a hell of a lot of emotional bandwidth in his actions and his observations and in creating space. And yeah, he was just so remarkable in my life, both of them. I literally call them angels.
Wow. Again, there is so much there. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to bring you back to what you said about your grandmother on the phone, and that she chokes up when she says goodbye every time. I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever stayed on the line and said to her, it's okay to cry?
That's a good question to ask. And I have said to her, it's okay. It's okay. You know, and I say, I love you again. It's okay. But, you know, that's definitely something that I can do next time I call, is just stay on the line and ask her, you know. And, you know, she obviously cries about her lifelong soulmates and different things. And I create the space for her. You know, her family loves her a lot, the biological family, but we have this certain connection where I always have space for her to get emotional and cry.
Yeah.
And some of the family aren't as open to that, which is fine. They're not there at that point. They can't handle the crying. And it's not that she's a wreck or she's crying all the time, but she's very in touch and in tune with her emotions.
And with you.
Yeah, yeah. And so she can cry, she can talk about Clivey and she can start crying, and say, I love him so much, and say some seriously, for lack of a better word, depressing or heart-aching things, like, I wish she gets very intense.
Yeah.
Very intense. She's very emotional and very intense. And a lot of the other family, I don't think, can handle that. But I will always give her the space to talk about that. And with the crying, it's kind of like, it's a funny thing because it's kind of like she's really trying to put the phone down as well. So like when I say, it's okay, I love you, I'll call you, it's okay, I know, and so it's kind of from both of us,
Yeah.
And because she says, I'm so happy you've set your life up in Perth. I'm so happy that you've got everything going for you over there. I'm so happy that you're away from your mother. I'm so happy. And, and she still opens her door for my mother. And my mother's done terrible things to her and my stepfather. She still opens her door, so, but she's happy for me. She's really happy for me. And she never once said, I wish you could come over. I wish you could come over tomorrow. I wish, she goes, when I say I want to plan to come over, I'd love to come over, she goes, that would be lovely. I would love that. That would be lovely. But there's no expectations, which is amazing, because we all have a lot of expectations. I know I have expectations, and a lot of souls on this earth walk around with heavy expectations right up until they pass over. So she just has no expectations for me. And that number 33 is quite interesting as well. That number 33 is why I'm actually here in Perth.
Tell us.
So I was in Johannesburg, South Africa at the time, with my biological dad, and my bapu, so his father had passed away, and I was over in South Africa and I was spending time with my biological dad. I was staying there for a couple of months. So I was staying in Johannesburg, living there with him, and I was about 22 at the time, and I had just come out of a serious relationship with an older woman. She was about 6 years older than me, and living in Australia. And I wasn't really looking for anyone. It's funny, like you said, seeking. Sometimes you're seeking and you will find. Other times you're not looking, and life will find you, and timing will find you. And I wasn't looking for anyone, and I got introduced to. There was a family friend in South Africa, and they introduced me to someone who lived in Perth. And they literally said, as I was sitting around, I was talking about my heart story. So I was actually opening up with them about my heart story, which back then I didn't open up a lot, but I was just starting to open up a little bit more, kind of prompted by my father, my biological father, like tell your cousins about the story. And then they told me, oh my gosh, we know someone in Perth who just is very into the soul, very into astrology. I think you'd be a perfect match. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And they showed me a photograph of this person, and I just went, wow, very pretty, very pretty. And I felt like we talked about connection. I felt this connection. So, I started chatting to her on Facebook, just chatting in Messenger. And we had the first chat. And then suddenly it just turned into paragraphs. And it was just like, it was wild. It was like massive amounts of information. And then it turned into voice calls and everything. And she brought it up. She said, it's so funny. Every time you send me a message, it's like around like 33, 733. So, she noticed, and she said, and I've been noticing the number 33 in my life a lot. And I said, that's strange because, and we were messaging and we're out. And I said, I'm at the table number 133 with my father and his friends, so that's when the numbers started popping up, and it was everywhere, number plates, it was everywhere. So anyway, that developed, and eventually, I decided I've got a friend in Perth who I know, and there's this lovely woman that I've had a connection with. Let me, on my way back to Sydney, go through Perth and have a look. I've been there a few times before, just traveling, and I kind of made the decision to move over to Perth, and I wanted to kind of move over. My grandfather always said, when you become an adult, Kyle, you need to get out the nest. You need to get out the nest. You need to leave your mother, which was my grandmother. You need to get out the nest, and you need to basically decide your destiny. And so I moved over to Perth, and that's what brought me over here. And only been 4 years, but it's been a wealth of my business has grown. It was my backbone when I got made redundant during the virus. All these sorts of things. Personal growth has grown astronomically since 10 years since I've had my heart operation. My ejection fraction, which is the quality of your heart, how well it's doing with pumping fluid, was always around 35%. And when it gets around 20% and lower, it's touch and go. It's very dangerous. You can't get on planes. And when I first found out about the virus, I was told about it. I need to go and boost my immune system as much as I can. I need to get back into massive health. That's when that book, Can't Hurt Me, found me. Woke up at 4 a.m. every morning, went for runs, got back into juicing how I would when I healed my heart, meditation, affirmations in the mirror, look at myself dead in the eye, did 4 months of that, and my ejection fraction went up to 49%. And that number did not change once. Fantastic. Did not change once. My electrosurgeon was confounded. He was confused. He said, I don't know what to do, because I wanted to give you, we wanted to do a surgery, we wanted to do another operation, I want to give you these drugs, but, the percentage of, your ejection fraction, everything has gone up. Your heart is actually now functioning in atrial fibrillation and loving it and enjoying it. And he said that happens with 5% of people just post-surgery. But to happen this much later is just, it doesn't make sense. To which he then went, all right, we might as well hit you with everything. And he wrote out 6 scripts for me. And I walked out of there, as I always did. And I went, all right, I'm going to get these scripts, I'm going to get these drugs. And I went, hang on a minute. I've totally grabbed a hold of my destiny.
Yes.
I've manifested my best health since I've been, I've had this heart situation. What am I doing?
Yeah. And
I was literally in the pharmacist, and I felt this sort of connection to God, this sort of connection. And I went, no, this is your responsibility.
Guess he just fell off the wall again.
The man himself.
He's made another appearance. Just as you were saying, no, I had to think, well, I got to decide my destiny here.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful segue.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thank you. I think that your ability to really gain insight from everything that you've gone through and really understand that extra layer of connection, and the fact that sometimes we are walking in the world with some layers on that we can take off. I mean, let's go back to that moment of, you were really hot, and so you literally stripped everything off, and then all of a sudden you're really cold, so you put layers back on. And it's like there are times in our lives where we do both. Sometimes we're putting layers on for protection, like, the mental abuse from your mum. You've got to put some layers on for protection. And then learning that you could take those layers off with your grandparents. I think it's wonderful that you've been able to understand so much of your journey and yourself along the way. I have to ask, the bug.
Yes. Yeah.
How did it get there? Do they know? And did it eventually go away?
It's funny. These questions are the questions that I usually get asked. And I probably should write them down, because it's, what I want to talk about, or how I perceive it, like you said, perspective is totally different. But people will always ask very similar questions to the reaction of the story. And the bug, they had 8 causes that they investigated extensively, and they tried to work it out. For everything from have you been doing intravenous drugs, which I have never done, but that's one of the easiest ways that you get this disease. From did you have a wound cut? Was your heart already impacted? Which was unlikely, because I was playing rugby Saturday and Sundays, every Saturday and Sunday. And they eventually said, look, it's a 1 in a billion chance. The fact that you got this bug at your age, just, we can't put it to anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually took that and went, that's actually great. Mm-hmm. If I've got one thing on my life lorded over me, that this is the reason you got this bug, and if it was something stupid, that would be a lot more emotionally taxing.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess I was kind of lucky. But yeah, it was just, and look, to be honest, and you might hear it, maybe it's a cliche thing to say, but it is a true thing. My life catapulted from that experience.
Yeah.
And I know where I was going. And my cardiologist at the time said something brilliant. He said, you're going to naturally distance yourself from your friends. Your life is going to be totally changed. This experience is going to shift you and you're going to be in a different place. I just want to prepare you for that. And I'm really glad he told me that, because it was right. Your perspective, what's important to you, your timeline, everything has shifted. Geez, if this happened and now this happened and I'm going to have to manage my life, I'm going to manage my heart, I'm going to have to be conscious of it. Let me actually find out what's in that heart and what that heart desires, and let me be true to that heart now.
Oh, yes. Can I share something with you?
Please do.
I love that we're comfortable enough to do this.
Yeah.
So I can't remember if I mentioned it when you interviewed me or not. However, going through everything that I went through with my vocal cords specifically, and not even having a diagnosis until 8 years ago, and I'd basically had this all of my life. And I know I did speak about the metaphoric loss of my voice. And so there were two pivotal moments in my life where my voice was affected. I felt that I lost my voice when I went through the trauma with my ex-husband and everything that happened in that marriage.
Yeah.
Then I literally lost my voice for those 2 years and was looking down the barrel of a tracheostomy and losing my voice forever. No warning, essentially, that I was going to physically lose my voice at that time. When I went through both of those experiences, I went through a transformational process of really peeling off all the layers. And then this is what I do with my artwork. I went through that process. I peeled off all the layers. I stripped myself bare. I literally had nothing left that was in the way of me looking at exactly who I was in those moments in the darkest times of my life. Mm. And from being able to do that and accept who I was and the humanness that I had stepped into in being able to go through that process and trusting that process, then allowed me to sync up who I wanted to be in the world, and I could step into my true potential. The fact that I now use my voice to be impacting so many people across the world on a massive scale, and I hope it will only continue to get bigger and bigger as you have your vision as well. I want to bring back to the fact that this happened to your heart, and you literally used the words, the bug was eating a hole in my heart. What do you think now that you're on the other side of this? And the fact that you just spoke then about you had to see what was inside of your heart. You had to literally get to know. And the bug literally bore a hole in your heart for you to see.
It's come as pure as the day to me as you asked me that question. It's come straight to my mind. I don't have to think about it all. I was denying the ability to be loved. Mm-hmm. And I truly think that is what took me out and what affected me. Emotions, you can see people's minds when they're stressed out, it totally affects their body. Emotions have an even bigger power. The mind is powerful, but your emotions and what you're doing. And with my mind, I was using my mind and making stupid decisions, and I had a couple of girlfriends when I was younger, and and then I had my grandmother, and I had different relationships where I could source love. I could open myself up for love. And every time I opened myself up for love, I would shut myself off again. And it was, I'm opening myself up too much. This is too raw. If I get hurt this time, it's going to take me out for good. Like, I don't know if I can make it through. And that's where I can understand people when they think of ending the pain in their life, and why I think it's an important fight for every human on this earth to take up, to try and help people when they think they're wanting to end the pain, to show love and show unconditional love, because that's what we're looking for. We want attention, we want love, we want connection.
Yeah.
You know, and that's I definitely think it's my heart, and I was denying myself love.
Mm. And so in those moments when you described how you were in the hospital room and you had essentially two camps here, you had the people who were going, okay, you've made this decision to go the holistic route here. And then you had the others who were like, you're basically playing with your life here. Why aren't you going down what the surgeons are saying? Why aren't you doing this operation, you know? And I think that is as much a test of your love as it was theirs in that moment. And you mentioned, you know, the people who were very supportive to you in that time, how much that helped to pull you through that.
Yeah. Love is everything. And it's not a nice song or a cute quote. It's really is everything. And I think what love is in another way, you know, for lack of a better word, we'll use the English word love. I think it's when you are connecting your mind, your heart, and your soul, and it's in perfect alignment. Because we can spend a lot of time in our mind, in our head. We can spend a lot of time maybe just, you know, in our emotions and our heart, and maybe just doing things because we feel like I'm doing this because I feel like it, you know. Maybe we can spend a lot of times in our soul. I know I can spend a lot of times up in the clouds, you know, just and, you know, I have the situations where I astro travel and I have dreams flood my brain, and I'm kind of working out what reality is, you know, and I'm still trying to understand what that is. But we can spend moments and a lot of our time in those different places. And, you know, let's be frank, a lot of our time is spent in our mind. That's where most of our time is spent, you know, and it's retraining that mind. So that's really important. Along with that, that's so important, is aligning your mind, your heart, and your soul. And that's love. That's a loving state, you know.
That's what I see in your photography.
Wow.
It's essentially the vessel that allows you to remind yourself to be grounded and to align. And through that connection that you're having with whatever your subject or whoever your subject is, you're allowing them to have the space to do the same.
Yeah, geez, that's a better insight that I've had in my photography.
Well, I understand it from that deeper level.
Yeah.
That's the journey I went on as well, and I can see that. And I think that's why I mean, you probably remember the second I saw your first photograph, I'm like, oh, wow. Like, let me have a look at that because I got it.
Yeah, you're right. It was a connection. I literally just didn't know why, but I just needed that subject to stay there. I needed to talk to them for an hour, for 2 hours. And just eventually I would feel that the human would show their soul. There would be a certain split second where they would reveal a part of their soul, and I was allowed the opportunity to capture it.
Yes, I love that. I often tell a story about two people that I photographed. This is going back quite a long time ago. So I think my son was only maybe 5 years old. We were still living in Melbourne. And I'd been in touch with these people, and two of the people that I'd photographed with a whole heap of others, we did like this whole eight sessions sort of in one over a whole day, exhausting. And then I asked these two people to come back another time where it was just going to be them. And I saw something and I felt something with both of them. And we weren't able to get it out in that space where there was so much else going around. So I invited them both back separately and said, okay, let's do this. One of them, she came the first time fully maked up, you know, like there was all this stuff going on. I said, okay, I want you fresh. Just show up. I don't want makeup on, like just show up. I want you to be you. And the other one, he was already being very much himself, but I said, let's do something creative. Like, let's just create the space and see what happens, you know?
Yes.
And he's like, oh, let's do that. And so it was different energy for both and very different results. And I loved both equally.
Yeah.
With the gentleman that I said, oh, let's be creative and let's just, you know, see what happens. He totally let his guard down. And I got some of the most beautiful moments captured looking into his soul. You know, you can just, everyone looks at the photo and they're like, oh, I can see, like, there's so much going on there. And that was exciting and that was fun. And at the same time, it was very deep. And so that connection was quite palpable. With the lady, it was a very different type of connection in space. And I almost used to feel bad about how I went about it. I said to her, okay, I want you to stand in front of this wall. Now I just want you to be. And she was like looking at me going, be what? You know, like, and she was a model. And I'm like, no, I just want you to, I told you to come with nothing on. You've done that. That's awesome. Now I just want you to be yourself. And it was apparent she didn't know what herself was. She was so used to going, oh, you want me here or you want me as this or doing that. And I was like, no, just, and I literally stood there and I didn't take a photo for, I think, half an hour. And I stood there in front of her for 30 minutes. And I literally did the compassionate push that I always talk about with people. I'm like, I'm going to make you stand here until you let your guard down and I can see who you really are. And she didn't like it. She felt very uncomfortable. And this is why I, you know, for a long time, I felt quite awful about how I did it. At the same time, something in me knew, because I'd connected with her and I knew that was what she needed to drop her guard. Well, after about 30 minutes, I finally saw her and there was a shift and I went right and I started taking a couple of photographs. I think I only took 2 or 3 from memory. They're some of my most favourite photographs that I have of her for that reason. And then afterwards she sort of stayed there and I'd basically by that point given her permission to move and she stayed there. And I was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we just need someone else to bring us into their space to allow us to make our own.
Yeah. You're shifting their state of being. And it's, you know, well done. Well done for you opening to that, because that's opening something else up to that person, you know. And I know when I traveled through Peru when I was getting into photography and I was taking photographs, and they're some of my most amazing portraits, but I didn't spend much time. I just found in Peru, in the people there, you know, they live their soul forward. You know, they exist with their soul forward, and they show their soul. There's no reason for them not to. You know, that's how they are, and it was just amazing. There weren't many people that I encountered that didn't, which is the exact reverse from what I'd experienced the rest of my life. But I think that is one incredible goal to have in your life for all the listeners at home, for you, for me. If you can live your soul forward, if you can live your true essence forward as much as possible in your life, imagine the state of being, imagine what you're drawing. You know, you'll start expecting great things to happen for you. You know, imagine all the gifts that you'll be able to give to life and all the gifts you'll receive, you know, because you're shifted.
On that note, Peruvians are how do I term this? Most people who live in Peru do not have an awful lot of material things. And their focus is very different. Their cultural focus is very different to a lot of Western society. And I think that when you take a lot of that extraneous stuff away and you get down to what we're doing here, living in an experience, which is what a lot of people in Peru, I actually have a friend whose sister is married to someone from Peru, and you know, I've spoken to him a number of times and he's spoken about what life is like there. And I really get the feeling that, again, it's that KISS principle. They keep life simple. They're focusing on what's important to them. And that they are not material things enough to get you going and get you, you know, surviving with whatever level of comfort you can, but that life is about the experiences and it's about the journey. It's about who you share that journey with.
Yeah, exactly. And they are people of the land, 110%. You know, their way of being, their mode of being is natural first. If I need, then intervention, obviously. But natural first. for everything. And they have answers for everything. You know, I had altitude poisoning. Here's some coca leaves. You know, like they had answers for everything, and very spiritual place.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're getting down to the brass tacks of what life is. You know, what life's about.
Well, the earth has a lot of energy, and when we can ground ourselves, when we can tap into that energy, it is a life source as well. I mean, we are of this earth, and depending on your beliefs, a lot of us understand that we go back to the earth, whether that is that you get cremated or buried, your ashes or your body are going to become one with the earth again. And so, you know, this is part of our cycle. And I think that, again, it's about connection.
Exactly. And there'll be times along the journey you'll lose yourself, for sure. You know, but if you've planted those seeds, you can come back to that you know, connection to the source, to what served you well in the past. You know, with me, I was able to go back to that juicing diet in a situation where, you know, aren't you worried about, you know, the world, you're getting sick? No, let me be proactive. Let me be a victor, not a victim. Let me see what I can do, what I control, you know, and because you will get lost along the way. Like, you know, you will get swayed. Life will sway you. But set up that base foundation.
Absolutely. And again, coming back to those layers, I mean, we've implemented solo episodes for season 2. Yep. And one of the first solo episodes, or the second one, I should say, was about identity. And it's related to every single interview I've done so far in season 2. Every single time identity has come up. And here it is again, you know, just getting through those layers to discover who you are and what's important to you. And yeah, there's certainly signs out there. And as long as we're seeking and becoming observant to be able to see those signs, and then we can interpret them and decide our destiny. I love that.
The way.
So I have one more question for you before we let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Yep.
That question is, would you be the person you are today if it were not for the adversity?
Certainly not. Certainly not. It's it makes you, and, you know, it builds character, and not just physical, you know, personality. It builds soul character, you know, heart and soul character. And what do I mean when I talk, you know, about heart and soul? You know, I mean, it's more than your physical, you know, beliefs, your physical mode of being, your mind, the physical realms. You know, the physical realms here, they don't affect you in the same way, you know. And there's, like we said, when you sway, there's days that they do. There's days that you get, you know, anxious. There's days where, you know, the world seems like it's crumbling around you. You know, but we have to understand the world, you know, everyone is in the world. You know, we're all experiencing what's going on in the world, but we're all experiencing it in a different way. And when you live from heart and soul, you know, you'll experience it in a different way. And Epictetus, the Greek philosopher, has this amazing saying. And, you know, during the whole virus and the uncertainty, and, you know, I usually don't watch a lot of media, but I was, you know, watching nonstop for a couple of days and started to develop like anxiety and depression. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm not, you know, I've been able to overcome so many things in my life. I've been very strong. I've come to a place, how am I getting to the state? And I remember listening to this quote from Epictetus. Someone was saying a quote, and it's quite harsh, quite tough, and a lot of people probably won't like it, but it was, you are a little soul carrying around a corpse. And, you know, it's very intense.
That is.
But the fact of separating yourself from the physical, the fact of separating yourself from the financial collapse and the economic collapse and the health collapse and the society, you know, all the things around you that you're being told every day. And it's a real big concern of mine for the youth of today and people that are already suffering from anxiety and depression, and all human beings. It's not good to be told every day how your world's ending. You know, it's not a good mode. It's not a good state of being. So that quote actually made me cry. I'm going to be totally transparent with you. It made me cry and smile and cry of joy and just go, wow, you know, they can own everything, they can have everything, but they can't have your soul.
Yeah. You've always got control over your choices of how you think about every situation experience.
Exactly.
I sort of lied because I said I had only that one more question and I've got another one.
bonus round.
Bonus round. When you spoke about looking in your mother's eyes and there was that shift you noticed, there was that change, and essentially you saw the lack of love in that state that she was in, that disconnection not only to you, to herself. Do you think that it's moments like that that you had to go through in order to understand how to really connect to the soul?
Yes, for sure. I think you need to see everything. Jim Rohn has a great quote as well. I think he says you need a book on Hitler and you need a book on Gandhi. Shut everything up on one sector of society or on one, or you know, things that are classified evil, or burn the books on one part of history. You know, you need it all to understand. And you know, why did we come here? I think a lot of the reason we came here is to learn and to understand and to find meaning in life and seek things out and have things seek you out. And you know, as my counselor said to me in school, Kyle, what matters in life is how you react. That's all a part of seeking. That's all a part of discovering, you know, that there's more to you than just the physical. There's more to you than just the numbers. There's more than just the papers. There's more to us, you know, and we know it. We've always known it.
There's more than the darkness and the shadow.
Yeah.
And yet as a photographer, you know how much you love those shadows.
Yes, we do. We do. I love some good contrast.
Yeah, it's in the contrast that we get to really experience the journey.
Yeah, exactly. And the journey is everything.
It is. It is. Thank you so much, Kyle. How can people get in contact with you if they would like to do so?
And thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me on. I think it's always it's an experience. It's a journey. It's a journey and a destination. We're arriving at places along the whole way, and I've enjoyed those places we've arrived at and what we've uncovered. And it's a healing process. So thank you, Vera-Lee.
You're welcome. So have I.
That's awesome. That's what we want. So where people can find me, I'm on YouTube as Kyle Spirides, Instagram as Kyle Spirides, and that's where I put up the daily Decide Your Destiny videos, which are basically inspirational videos from the day, taking real life occurrences that are happening to the day and how I've reacted to them and how my perspective has shifted. For my book, you can find my book at kylespirides.com. That's where I'm selling my book. And yeah, my photography site is Soul Gazing Photography if you want to see some of my photography. And yeah, just check me out at Kyle Spirides. And if you want to send me a message, if you want to ask me some questions, if there was something that you found interesting, or you have a hard situation, or you're going through some mental strife, or if you've got a disconnected relationship with your mother or anything, please ask me questions. I'm always keen to connect with people and see how we can help each other out on this planet.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Amazing. That was an experience.
In what way?
Which, you know, this is why we love life. We want to discover, and we want to you know, go to new places. And I definitely went to new places with you then.
Thank you for tuning in to the WhyMe with Vera-Lee podcast series and honouring today's guest and their story. Here is a short snippet from our next guest and episode to be released. It really is the opposite of the unrest. And I think that far too often we ignore that feeling of unrest. And a lot of people will call some aspect of that intuition. I'm not sure what your definition of intuition is, and I might get you to answer that in just a second. But certainly I think that those feelings are there to give us information. And so often in today's world, with the chaos that is going on around us constantly, it can be quite easy to ignore that feeling of unrest. What is your definition of intuition?
It's interesting how you ended that sentence with that, right? You started the intuition and then you ended it with the unrest. And I think that's part of it. So I was just having a conversation about this with a client actually. And my definition of intuition is a connection to your soul. And in life, in my professional experience, in my personal experience, there are really two main choices we can make, right? There's a choice we can make from the ego, like we were talking about before, and there's a choice we can make from the soul, and that's intuition. And it's interesting that you said unrest and resistance. How we know if we're making a choice from the ego or the soul is if that resistance is there, right? There are always going to be situations where a choice from the ego is necessary, right? Like if we're on the road and there's a car coming and the ego is there to protect us to make a choice, we're going to want to make that choice. But if we are in a gym, for example, and we walk into the gym and suddenly our ego is telling us we're not good enough, where we shouldn't be lifting up a weight, we shouldn't be doing that position because other people are looking at us, giving us weird looks, we're not worth it, we're, all these things, that's going to be a choice from the ego that if we make it, is going to have resistance, right? It's going to have, we're going to know that it's not correct from us because we're going to be swimming upstream. Versus in that same context, we're in the gym and we don't listen to that choice, and rather we have this other choice of intuition. We start moving in a way that feels good to us. We start moving our body in a way that opens us up and fills us full of love. We start moving in a way that connects us deeply to something we might not actually know or have experienced yet, but feels lighter, feels correct, and feels more supported.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that explanation and your definition. And I love the way that you describe that scenario, because so many people I know will say to me, oh, I won't go to a gym because I don't fit the mold. I don't fit in. Oh, people look at me, all this other stuff. And the way that you just explained it then, there is a choice to be made, whether you pay attention to that or not. And then if you operate within that capacity of I'm just going to move and get into what feels right and be guided by my soul, that is such a key to unlocking so much in life, in every scenario, in whatever it is that you're doing, be it walking into a gym, be it walking into a room full of people, be it walking into your own space.
Okay, so I'm so passionate about this whole idea. We could do a whole podcast just talking about this one thing, right? I'm loving all these questions. You're hitting all of them. So discipline is, again, this is something that I'm an example of all these things I'm going to say tonight. For such a long time, I saw discipline as again, resistance, something I need to stick to. I need to have discipline to go to the gym and be there, spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes and go home, lift the weight, discipline, right? There's this tension behind it. And unfortunately, that in itself pushes you away, right? The discipline, you start, why would I want to have discipline? Why would I want to implement that? Very recently, a mentor gave me another mindset shift on this, like you're saying, right? It's our perception of the words rather than the actual words themselves. And reframed it as, rather than saying discipline, call it devotion, right? Devotion to whatever you're doing. In this case, it's devotion to your self-love. It's devotion to your inward journey, to this soul, to this intuition, to this expression of who you actually are. So rather than saying, okay, today I'm going to go to the gym because it's part of my disciplined routine to lift X amount of weights, switch it up and say, I'm going to go to the gym because it's a devotion to me and who I want to become and the strength and healthy body that I want to create to get there.
I'd like to thank Mel Mercedes for giving her 5-star review and rating titled, You Had Me in Goosebumps. Vera, I truly believe you, my friend, are here for a big purpose. And thanks for creating this show, allowing people to share that moment we all question, why me? Much love for you in this journey. I'd like to personally thank you for leaving your feedback in the form of a rating and review so that other people who come across this podcast have the opportunity to tune in and gain value that you yourself have gained from these stories, from these guests, and from the WhyMe movement that is behind the WhyMe podcast to inspire, connect, and empower you. And I encourage each of you to go and rate and review on the podcast platform where you listen to the WhyMe with Vera-Lee podcast as a nice way to show your support for our show.